Jason wasn't just my brother, he was my other half. We were only 2 years apart, but those 2 years felt like nothing. We were inseparable, like two sides of the same coin. People in the neighborhood used to joke that if you saw one of us, the other wasn't far behind. And they were right. When we were kids, we shared everything: clothes, toys, secrets, even punishments. If Jason was in trouble, I was too. If I got scolded, Jason stood beside me, facing the heat. That's how much we had each other's backs. I remember one summer evening when the neighborhood kids challenged us to a football match. We were outnumbered, but it didn't matter. Jason was fast, I was strong. He ran, I defended. He scored, I celebrated. Together, we won. That night, lying on our backs on the grass, Jason whispered, "As long as we're together, nothing can beat us." And I believed him. At home, it wasn't much different. We studied together, we dreamed together, we even made plans for our futures as if we'd never live apart. "One day, we'll run Dad's company side by side," Jason would say with a wide smile. And I'd nod, because back then, I couldn't imagine life any other way. Jason wasn't just my little brother. He was my best friend, my partner in everything. I thought nothing in this world could break us apart. But I was wrong. But as much as Jason and I loved each other, my parents didn't love us the same. Jason was their golden child, their miracle. My mother used to tell the story often, how my birth nearly broke her. She'd laugh while saying it, but the words stung. "You almost took my life bringing you into this world," she would joke at family gatherings. Everyone would laugh, everyone except me. Then she would turn and look at Jason with a soft smile. But when Jason came, everything was easier. He was my gift of peace. My father would join in too. He'd pat Jason's back and say, "When this boy was born, business started booming. He's my lucky charm." And just like that, every achievement, every happy moment, every blessing was somehow tied to Jason. I didn't mind at first. I loved him too. I was proud to be his big brother. I thought he deserved the love, the praise, the attention. But slowly, I began to notice the small things. At the dinner table, when I shared good news about school, my parents would give me a polite nod. But when Jason said the smallest thing, they clapped like he had just changed the world. When we played, if Jason lost, my mother comforted him. If I lost, my father said, "You should know better, you're the older one." And Jason? He started to notice it too. The extra smiles, the softer punishments, the special treatment. The first time I saw him smirk when my father scolded me, something inside me shifted. That was the seed. Small, silent, hidden, but seeds grow. And this one grew into something that would one day destroy us both. School was my escape. If home was where Jason wore the crown, then school was where I found my worth. I studied hard, competed harder, and soon my efforts paid off. I was bringing home awards, debate trophies, science fair medals, certificates of excellence. Teachers shook my hand, classmates looked up to me. I thought, maybe this would make my parents proud. And for a while, it seemed to work. My father would clap half-heartedly, my mother would. I found them smiling, but not at me. They were smiling at Jason, patting his head, whispering in his ear. My own moment of triumph belonged to him. That night, I expected Jason to congratulate me like he always used to. But he didn't. He sat across the room, arms folded, and said, "You think you're smarter than me now?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. But his eyes weren't playful anymore. They were sharp, cold. From that day, the air between us changed. The laughter we used to share turned into silence. The teamwork we once had became rivalry. And the bond we promised would never break started to crack. In our family, going to Yale University wasn't just education. It was tradition. My father went to Yale. My mother too. My uncles, my cousins. Every branch of our family tree carried that name with pride. Jason and I used to dream about it as kids. We'd sit under the mango tree in our yard, sketching out our futures. "We'll be roommates at Yale," Jason would say, his eyes glowing with excitement. And I'd smile, because in my heart, I wanted nothing more than to keep that promise. But when the time came, reality broke me. My parents called me into the living room one evening. Jason was already sitting there, smiling faintly like he already knew something I didn't. My father cleared his throat. "Son, you know we love you both," he began. Words I should have taken as a warning. "But we can't afford to send 2 children to Yale at once." The room went silent. Then he continued, "Jason will go to Yale. You can choose another school. Just make sure it's not an A-list one. We can't afford it." His words stabbed like knives. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to protest, waiting for him to say, "No, Dad, let my brother go first. He's older." But Jason didn't say a word. He just lowered his gaze and smirked ever so slightly, as if victory had already been handed to him. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with betrayal. I thought about all the nights we planned our futures together, about all the promises. And for the first time in my life, I realized my parents never saw us as equals. They had chosen their heir, and it wasn't me. But life has a way of balancing scales. Because what my parents didn't know was that I had already been offered a scholarship to Harvard, the very school my father warned me against. An A-list school, a place beyond their reach, beyond their control. So while Jason went off to Yale with my parents' blessings and their pride, I walked into Harvard with nothing but determination burning in my chest. And deep down, I made a silent vow. One day, I won't just be their forgotten son. One day, I'll make them regret choosing Jason over me. The day I graduated from Harvard was one of the proudest of my life. Standing there in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I felt unstoppable. I couldn't wait to come home, to show my parents that their first son, their forgotten child, had made it. On the flight back, I imagined the celebration. I pictured my father shaking my hand, my mother hugging me, Jason clapping and saying, "That's my brother." But life had other plans. When I walked into the family estate, something felt different. The staff greeted me politely, but there was no excitement in their voices. My parents were seated in the lounge, beaming, not at me, but at Jason. My father stood up proudly and said, "Son, welcome back. You'll be glad to know the company is in good hands now. Jason has taken over." I froze. Taken over? Jason smiled from across the room, dressed in a sharp suit, a confidence in his eyes I had never seen before. My younger brother, the one who used to chase me around the yard with muddy shoes, was now sitting in my father's chair. I forced a smile, but inside my chest burned. I had expected a seat at the table. Instead, I was offered a seat in the crowd. When board meetings came, I was there, but not as a decision-maker, not as the elder son. I was just another employee. Jason spoke. Everyone listened. I spoke. They nodded politely and moved on. And my parents? They fed it. "Jason has vision," my father would say during dinners. "Jason was born for this," my mother added. And every time, Jason's smirk grew wider. The bond we once shared, the brotherhood we swore would never break, was gone. Jason no longer saw me as his elder brother. He saw me as an obstacle, a threat to his throne. And the worst part? My parents encouraged it. For the first time, I wasn't just ignored. I was replaced. It was a Thursday afternoon when Jason walked into my office. He looked calm, casual, with that same confident smirk he had worn ever since he became the golden prince of the family. In his hand, he carried a folder. "Big brother," he said smoothly. "There are some documents the company needs all executives to sign. Routine adjustments. Just formalities." I didn't question it. Why would I? Despite everything, despite the favoritism, despite the distance, I still trusted him. He was my little brother, my Jason. So I signed. Page after page, my pen glided across the lines. Jason stood there, watching me, his eyes flickering with something I didn't notice at the time. Satisfaction. When I was done, he closed the folder and patted my shoulder. "Thanks, brother. You're making things easier for both of us." Then he walked out. Weeks later, I learned the truth. The routine adjustments weren't adjustments at all. They were transfer agreements. Hidden in those pages, buried in legal jargon I didn't read, was a clause that stripped me of every share my father had left me. With one signature, I had handed my entire inheritance to Jason. I stormed into his office, papers in hand, my voice shaking. "What have you done?" He leaned back in his chair, smirking that same smug smirk. Business, brother. You should have read before signing. The words hit harder than a punch. I ran to my father, expecting outrage, expecting him to defend me, to fix this mess. But he didn't even look surprised. Instead, he scoffed. Aren't you supposed to be the smart one? You'll be fine. Stop crying over signatures. My hands trembled. My heart shattered. In that moment, I realized something painful. I hadn't just lost my shares. I had lost my family. And worst of all, my little brother, the one I once trusted with my life, had become the one who destroyed it. After Jason stole my shares, I thought things couldn't get any worse. But I was wrong. He began to chip away at me slowly, like a sculptor carving away stone until nothing was left. First, he cut my salary. No warning, no explanation. 1 month, my paycheck was slashed in half. When I confronted him, he leaned back in his chair and said with mock sympathy, "Budgets are tight. I'm sure you'll understand." I didn't. Then came the humiliation. During meetings, he interrupted me mid-sentence. He mocked my ideas in front of staff. He once said, "That's why Dad chose me and not you," in front of the entire board. Everyone laughed nervously. I felt like my insides were burning. At family dinners, my parents didn't even pretend anymore. They hung on to Jason's every word, praising his every move. Me? I might as well have been invisible. I could have disappeared from that table and nobody would have noticed. The final blow came one rainy evening. Jason called me into his office. He slid a thin envelope across the table and said coldly, "If you don't like how things are done here, maybe you should leave." Inside the envelope was my new contract. My position had been restructured. My salary, reduced to a fraction of what it once was. My throat tightened, my chest heavy. I stared at Jason, searching his eyes for even a flicker of the brother I once knew. But all I saw was cold ambition. I walked out of that office in silence, my shoes echoing down the hallway. That was the last day I set foot in the company my father built, the company I once dreamed of running side by side with my brother. I went home that night, sat in the darkness of my small apartment, and cried, not because I had lost money or power, but because I had lost my brother. The Jason I once knew no longer existed. All I had left was bitterness. And bitterness, if left to fester, hardens into something else. Leaving my father's company felt like walking away from everything I'd ever known. I had no money, no shares, no respect, and no family behind me. The world suddenly felt so quiet. Too quiet. The first mornings were the hardest. I'd wake up, dress in a suit, and then sit in silence. No office to go to. No purpose. Just four walls closing in on me, reminding me that I had been cast aside. But rock bottom does something to a man. It strips you of illusions. It forces you to face the truth. And the truth was simple. If I wanted to survive, I couldn't rely on anyone. Not Jason. Not my father. Not even my family. I had only myself. So I swallowed my pride. I took a position at a small, failing company. The salary was barely enough to cover rent. The office smelled of damp paper and broken dreams, and the employees looked like ghosts waiting to leave. Jason would have mocked me if he had seen me there. And maybe that thought was what fueled me. I worked like a man possessed. 12-hour days. Sometimes 16. I stopped caring about sleep, about weekends, about comfort. Every problem the company had, I attacked it like it was personal. Every project others gave up on, I revived. At first, people laughed. They said I was wasting my energy. But slowly, they stopped laughing. Slowly, they started following my lead. Within months, I was no longer just an employee. I was the pulse keeping the company alive. Clients started asking for me by name. Investors started requesting meetings with me directly. And then, an opportunity came. A door I had been waiting for. The company had reached a breaking point financially. Shares were cheap, ownership fragile. Everyone saw a sinking ship. But I saw gold beneath the rubble. Piece by piece, I began buying in. Saving every penny, taking risks, reinvesting everything I had. It was reckless. It was dangerous. But I didn't care. And then, one day it happened. The same hands that once signed away my father's legacy signed again. But this time, I wasn't losing anything. This time, I was gaining everything. I became the owner. The boss. The man in charge. Standing in my new office, looking out over the city, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. I had built this with no family name, no inheritance, no safety net. Only grit. Only fire. Only me. But as sweet as that victory was, it wasn't enough. Because no matter how high I climbed, Jason's shadow loomed in the distance. He still had my father's company. He still carried the crown that should have been mine. And deep down, I knew my rise was only the beginning. The real story wouldn't be complete until Jason fell. It began slowly. At first, it was whispers, investors pulling out quietly, projects being delayed, deadlines slipping through Jason's fingers. The confident smile he once wore in every boardroom started to fade. I watched from a distance. I didn't interfere. Not yet. I read the reports, the newspapers, the financial journals. Each headline was a small crack in the empire Jason once ruled with arrogance. Company struggles to meet quarterly targets. Internal mismanagement rumored. CEO under pressure as shares decline. To the world, it was business. To me, it was justice. Jason had always believed he was untouchable. That our parents' favoritism, his stolen throne, his false confidence, would carry him forever. But now, without me by his side, he was exposed, vulnerable, and I didn't have to lift a finger. One evening, I sat in my office, my own office, in my own company, sipping a glass of whiskey as I watched Jason's press conference on the big screen. He was flustered, sweating under the lights, dodging questions about layoffs and financial losses. The same man who once mocked me in front of a boardroom now looked small, fragile, afraid. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to myself, "How does it feel, little brother?" But I wasn't done watching. Because cracks weren't enough. I wanted collapse. So, quietly, strategically, I started making moves. I invested in his competitors. I lured away his best employees with offers he couldn't match. I pulled strings behind the scenes, ensuring that every weakness in his company grew wider, deeper. Jason never saw it coming. And the sweetest part? He had no idea I was behind it. The boy who once stole my birthright was now drowning, and I was the tide pulling him under. Jason's company had become a sinking ship. Investors were gone. Projects had collapsed. Employees were walking out in waves. The man who once stood so tall now looked like a child trying to hold sand in his fists. But the final blow hadn't come yet. Not until me. It was a cold morning when I arrived at his office. I didn't send a notice. I didn't call ahead. I simply walked in, flanked by lawyers and executives from my company. The receptionist looked stunned, but didn't dare stop me. Everyone already knew the truth. The man who was once the forgotten son now held the keys. When I entered Jason's office, he was at his desk, his head buried in his hands. He looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes. "You," he whispered. I smiled faintly, setting down a thick stack of papers on his desk. "Yes, little brother. Me." He grabbed the documents, flipping through them with trembling hands. His face drained of color. Each page was proof that his company, the empire our father had handed him on a silver platter, no longer belonged to him. It belonged to me. "No, no, this can't be," Jason muttered, his voice breaking. I leaned forward, my tone calm but sharp as a blade. "Do you remember the day you tricked me into signing those papers? The day you stole my shares, my inheritance, my place in this family?" His eyes darted up to mine, filled with panic. "I didn't," he started, but I cut him off. "You did. And I let it go. I let it break me. But you forgot something, Jason. You forgot who I am. I don't stay down. I rise." The silence that followed was deafening. He looked smaller than ever, sitting behind that grand desk that no longer belonged to him. Finally, I straightened, pushing the papers toward him. "You don't work for Father's company anymore, Jason. You don't own it. You don't control it. From today," I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "You work for me." His lips parted, but no sound came out. His hands shook as he dropped the papers onto the desk. And in that moment, I saw it. The same boy who once sat under the mango tree with me, dreaming of Yale, dreaming of a future we'd build together. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who thought betrayal was strength. Now, that man sat broken in front of me. I turned to leave, my voice steady and final. You took everything from me, Jason. Now I've taken everything from you. And the difference is, I earned it. As I walked out, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. His silence told me everything. Justice had been served. Revenge was complete. Do you think I did enough? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.